On paper, it seemed like 2013's The Host should have been the world's next big young adult franchise. It was hitting the YA movie craze at just the right time, had the creator behind the highly successful Twilight series attached, and starred attractive up-and-coming actors. It had all the ingredients for a surefire hit. But despite everything, it failed both at the box office and with general audiences. And we never got that second film that was teased. So join me today as we revisit this forgotten failure. We'll explore the history behind the film, find out why it failed, and I'll offer up some of my personal thoughts on the movie. In case you didn't know, 2013's The Host is based on the 2008 book by the same name, written by Stephenie Meyer, who is probably most well known for her other young adult book series, Twilight. The book is set in a post-apocalyptic Earth after it was invaded by a parasitic alien race known as souls, and follows one soul's predicament when the consciousness of her human host refuses to give up her body. Now, the rights to The Host were swooped up right away, as the book came out the same year that the first Twilight film hit theaters, so many people saw this as the next potential cash cow. Producers Nick Weschler, Steve Schwartz, and Paula May Schwartz acquired the film rights to The Host in September of 2009, and it was announced that Gattaca and Lord of War director Andrew Niccol would helm the adaptation, serving as both the writer and director. For a brief moment, Susanna White was going to replace Niccol as their director, but this never came to pass. More updates would come in 2011, when Saoirse Ronan was cast as the main protagonist, Melanie Strider/Wanda. Shiloh Fernandez, Liam Hemsworth, Kit Harington, Jai Courtney, and Wilson Bethel all auditioned for the role of Jared Howe before Max Irons was cast. Additionally, Eva Green, Haley Atwell, and Claire Danes were all offered the part of the Seeker before Diane Kruger got the part. Lastly, we also got Jake Abel as Ian O'Shea to round out the rest of the main cast. A release date was set for March 29th of 2013, and in February of 2012, the film officially went into production, shooting primarily in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, along with some on-location shooting in New Mexico. By the end of production, the budget was estimated to be a decent $40 million. The Host had an opening weekend gross of $10 million, coming in at number 6 in the box office behind G.I. Joe, Retaliation, The Croods, Temptations, Confessions of a Marriage Counselor, Olympus Has Fallen, and Oz the Great and Powerful. It went on to make $26 million in the US and $36 million overseas for a total worldwide gross of $63 million. And $63 million is a pretty good take against a budget of $40 million, right? Wrong. That $40 million figure is not accounting for marketing, distribution, or the theater's cuts, which means a movie often needs to make 2 to 2.5 times its budget in order to be called a success. So that made The Host a box office failure, and it most likely lost a couple $1 million. And that of course invites the question of what went wrong and why it failed. I believe the main reason why The Host failed is because it didn't have the fandom that other popular YA books turned movies had at the time. No doubt it had its fans, but not enough to guarantee a successful film franchise. And I think this is most evident from the fact that the 2008 book never had a sequel. In 2009, Stephenie Meyer stated that she intended for The Host to be the first installment into a trilogy of books, and later in 2011, we would get another update that she had outlines for these sequels and had done some work on writing them. But in the 5 years between the first book's publication and the movie hitting theaters, fans got nothing. And they would continue to get nothing as it's been over a decade later and we still haven't seen a follow-up to the original novel. If the 2013 movie was a success, then obviously we would have got more books. But once the movie underperformed, I think Myers cut her losses and decided to abandon the property. To have no second book between 2008 and 2013 is huge for the genre that The Host is in. You need to strike quickly with the young adult genre because your audience grows out of the intended demographic so quickly. The marketing is also to blame for this film's underperformance. The trailers made sure to include all the energetic action sequences and interesting sci-fi elements, but the actual movie is pretty slow and dull and doesn't include that much action aside from a handful of scenes. Fans of the books obviously knew what they were getting into, but for general audiences who are just looking to see an action-filled alien invasion type movie, they were met with a boring love triangle, and of course that was a disappointment. And if you want to have a successful film franchise, you need to appeal to everyone, not just people who have already read the books. The promotional material also heavily pushed Stephenie Meyer's name and the connection to the Twilight franchise, but in 2013, the Twilight movies had eclipsed Meyer's name and even the books in popularity. So I don't think Meyer was as big of a selling point as the studio thought she was. Furthermore, they overestimated how much overlap was within these two fandoms. Twilight is a series that was heavily marketed towards young teens, with the first book coming out in 2005 and the first movie debuting in 2008. But by the time The Host hit theaters in 2013, a large portion of that young demographic had grown up and it was less likely they would want to commit to an entirely new young adult franchise, especially given that the Twilight franchise concluded 1 year earlier with Breaking Dawn Part 2. And for those audiences who were still hungry for another young adult movie, a better one had just hit theaters a year before The Host. The first Hunger Games movie came out in 2012 to positive reviews and huge box office numbers. The property would go on to have several successful sequels over the following years and even new ones being made to this day. The Hunger Games franchise was everything The Host dreamed of being. Why would audiences in 2013 waste their money watching a boring movie like The Host when Catching Fire would be in theaters by November? And last but certainly not least, the reviews were a huge factor for this movie not performing well. The Host currently holds a rotten 10% critic and a 50% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, in addition to a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb and a 2.4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. The film also received a 2.5 out of 4 from Roger Ebert, and this was unfortunately one of his last movie reviews and the very last review to be published during his lifetime. The Host simply did not have the momentum at the box office or the positive word of mouth to carry it into the range of profitability. But let me share some of my thoughts on the project and explain why I personally didn't like it. Man, I don't even know what to say about The Host. It is such an odd movie. It feels like the runtime is 5 hours long, but at the same time, nothing happens. I'm sorry if you like this movie, but I just don't get the appeal on this one. I will say, The Host is good for one thing. If you are having trouble sleeping lately and need something to knock you out, flip on this movie. It is so insanely boring that it will put you to sleep right away. I think watching paint dry would be a more engaging watch than this movie. It's impossible to talk about The Host without explaining the plot because it is so baffling and weird. So I'll give you a quick rundown, and as we go along, we'll knock away spaces on this YA movie bingo card, because trust me, this movie is really falling in line with all the classic tropes you find in this genre. I don't know who made this bingo card, but I'll link it in the description if you ever want to play with another movie in the future. I know I've already covered many on this channel that will give you some bingos. So this movie takes place in a world where these alien parasites have overtaken people's bodies and turned the world into a peaceful utopia at the expense of humans' free will. However, there are still some humans in the world not affected who have maintained their freedom, and one of them is our main character, Melanie. Melanie is different because she is a fighter, and when an alien gets placed into her head, she convinces it that what they are doing is bad and go back to their humans' secret base. So they escape the alien society and get hunted down by these other aliens known as Seekers, which are being led by this very persistent one. This ragtag group of misfits don't trust Melanie at first because she could be one of the Seekers, but she shows them that she's different and they all learn to trust her. Then, the parasite in Melanie's head gets the new name of Wanda, and she falls in love with a boy. However, Melanie's old brooding boyfriend, who hates these aliens, is also there, so there's a bit of tension. It's a love triangle, but it's technically a love quadrangle, since Melanie and Wanda are two different people, but they share the same body. It's weird. While this has been going on, the survivors have been trying to extract the aliens from the humans' bodies, which has been killing both of them, and this upsets Wanda. But she gets over it when they realize that Melanie's brother got hurt, and they need to find a way to heal him before he dies. Wanda then goes to the alien's secret base to get some tech to heal him. But it's pretty lame since the aliens are so passive, they pretty much just waltz in and they take the medicine. This main evil seeker finally finds their secret base, but is incapacitated before she can do anything. Wanda then shows the humans how to extract the aliens from the bodies without killing either of them, so they do that to this evil seeker and shoot it into space. Wanda then makes the decision to remove herself from Melanie's body and tells the doctor not to put her into a new body because she now has empathy for humans. So this means she is effectively killing herself since she won't have a host body. But surprise! They put Wanda in a fresh corpse so she doesn't have to take over a living human's body. And then the movie ends with our main protagonist meeting other humans out in the world and seeing that other aliens have learned to coexist with other humans and that they are not alone. This teases the sequel that will never happen, and then the movie ends with a needle drop of Imagine Dragons Radioactive. Oh, and look at that, we got some bingos. Yeah, as you can probably tell, this movie is just odd. I mean, with other terrible YA movies like The Fifth Wave and I Am Number 4, at least stuff is actually happening. The Host doesn't really have a third act or a satisfying climax at all. The main villain tracks our protagonist down, they extract the soul out of her and shoot it into space, and then they put Wanda into a different body. It doesn't feel like they overcome any obstacle or have a big confrontation of any kind. There was some interesting world building going on in the background, which could have been cool if they explored it a bit more or gave the aliens something interesting to do, but they decided to focus on this boring love triangle the entire time. And the romance scenes in this movie lack any kind of spark or emotion at all. We aren't given any reason why these characters might like each other, and all the scenes just consist of them kissing and slapping each other. And on top of that, we have Melanie and Wanda fighting each other in their head, which gets pretty old pretty quick. I love Saoirse Ronan as an actor, but my goodness, the southern accent she is doing for Melanie's character could have used some work.
I can never trust you again.
How do I know I can trust you? I'm giving you exactly what you wanted. Taking you to my family could get them killed.
The script is also just giving her nothing good to work with. Thank goodness she recovered from this movie. At the end of the day, The Host has all the components of a good movie, but it failed to put them together in a cohesive manner. There's character arcs, but none of them are all that interesting. There's important themes and messages, but they're handled with very little nuance or care. There's action, but it's not shot well and is pretty boring. And there's romance, but there's no chemistry or emotion found within it. The movie just amounts to a whole lot of nothing. Alright, I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I've talked more about this movie than it deserves. Although it had all the ingredients of a successful film franchise, The Host failed to make an impression at the theater. It didn't have a big enough active fandom, it was banking too much on the Twilight brand and audience, and it was living in the shadow of the Hunger Games. And on top of everything, it was simply a boring movie. And that's the story behind 2013's The Host, yet another franchise that never was. But what are your thoughts on this movie? How does it compare to the book? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. This has been Tom from Isenhart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. And here's a clue for next week's video.
Maybe you don't know who I am.